Hey everybody, welcome back to the Harmonious Path with Jen. So before I get into today's video, I have to give a shout out to Ametrine Witch for inspiring this makeup look today. I will link her latest video below where she has a very similar look that I just thought was absolute bomb and had to recreate it for myself. And the video is also really good. It talks about the environmental impact of internet usage. So check that out below. But today I want to talk about my personal self-love journey. So it might get a little long, maybe a little rambly. I've got, an outline and points that I want to hit. So just grab a cup of coffee and let's just get right into it. So growing up, I was always kind of the nerdy kid in school. I got picked on a lot. I can remember, the first couple of years of grade school were okay, and then around fourth or fifth grade, for some reason, all of my friends just kind of abandoned me and stopped talking to me, and I don't really know why. But I always had at least a few close friends, and even though I got picked on a lot, I never really felt the need to try and change myself to fit in. Even through high school, I had kind of a wide group of friends and a few close friends, but I kind of just drifted among several different groups, never really entirely fitting into one or the other. But again, I just never felt the need to change myself. I don't think it even ever crossed my mind. I liked what I liked and I wore what I wanted to wear, and it was fine. I was who I was. So, that was always kind of a good thing in childhood. But then in my early 20s, I had graduated college about a year earlier. I got into a relationship and it had a pretty big impact on me. So I was very, very sheltered when I was growing up. So I feel like I was a little, maybe not as mature, more naive than maybe some other 23-year-olds might have been. I graduated college and I moved out the next day. And so I'd only had about a year to really fully start growing into myself, because when I was living at home, I couldn't really let my spooky gothiness come out. This was the days of Marilyn Manson and Columbine, and goth was very, very frowned upon, and, it was the devil's music and you must be a Satan worshiper. So I could not let that out when I was living at home. So it was still a very tenuous piece of my identity when I met this guy. Let's call him Tony, not his real name. And I just I've always fallen hard and fast. And I knew that it wasn't probably the greatest relationship. I knew that he was very, very controlling, but I was young and I thought I loved him. And the way I had grown up, it was never really overtly taught to me, but I just had this sense that what you do is, you go to college and you get your degree and you get married and you have kids. And if you're, mid to late 20s and you're still single, then you're just going to be an old maid. So I think I was a little scared of being single as well. A lot of underlying factors that led to me staying in this relationship far, far longer than I should have. But what I recognize now is that he was a narcissistic abuser, and I lost my entire sense of identity. Even though we met at a goth club, he just happened to be there. He was not goth in the least, but that's where we met, and I was very clearly goth the way I was dressed. But he belittled that and just completely stamped that out. And I was just really starting to have the freedom to explore my spirituality. And I remember at one point thinking, oh my gosh, I hope he doesn't find my books in my tarot deck. What would he say? And I actually threw several witchcraft books and my tarot deck away. I just threw them in the dumpster. I mean, that should have been a red flag, right? But I just really wanted to be in that relationship. And I had completely, he isolated me from all of my friends. And, I'm sure you've heard these stories many, many times, especially as people become more aware of what this is. But by the end of it, I pretty much had no idea of who Jen was. Even his friends had me programmed into their phone as Tony's meal ticket. I mean, wow. Like, so many red flags. And I can remember just thinking, there were moments where I thought this isn't healthy and I need to get out, but I didn't. So finally, 5.5 years into this, we were having yet another fight. It was never physically abusive, but it was very emotionally abusive and very controlling. And we fought all the time. I mean, there was like knockdown, drag out, screaming matches that would, without fail, end with him storming out and going to get wasted with his best friend, and then crawling home hungover the next morning, acting like nothing had ever happened. So we're having yet another fight. And he says at one point, "Do you want to make this work or not?" And for whatever reason, this very quiet, tentative voice within me just said, "No." And from that moment, there was no going back. Once I said that quiet little no, it didn't matter how much he backpedaled or what kind of empty promises he made. I was done. So thank God I finally did get out, but now I had to figure out who I was. So I remembered that tentative little baby bat that had just been spreading her fledgling wings, to get a little poetically dramatic about it. So I went back to that and I started looking into gothy music and the fashion and literature, and just really kind of immersing myself and realizing that, yes, this feels right to me. Like, this is who I am. Now, I'm not saying that I'm going to be wearing like, crazy makeup every time I go out. Most of the time I don't even wear makeup, but it feels right. It resonates with me. So I started getting into that, and I started learning and discovering and uncovering who Jen really was. I started getting really serious about writing and trying to write a novel that I wanted to publish. I made new friends. And through these new friends, I got back towards exploring my spirituality, which was such a gift. And during this time, I also managed to find myself in another relationship. I call myself a serial monogamist. I've only ever been single for about a 7-month stretch. That's the longest. It's not that I desperately seek out relationships when one ends. It just kind of happens that way, and I've never taken the time to really be single. So I was figuring out who I was and really developing a strong sense of self. And the relationship that I was in was, it was good for that, but it was not a good relationship in that I felt more like I had a roommate than a boyfriend, and later a husband. And because that connection just really wasn't there, I ended up throwing myself into my writing. I had a, Monday through Friday, 40-hour-a-week job, and then I would come home and just write or edit or format for publishing, or try to start a coaching business that I had no qualifications or knowledge or anything of how to actually do. It never went anywhere, but I made the website and all the content, and I just put all my time and energy into working and being productive and creating things, and that became a big part of my identity. So when we finally got divorced about 2 years after we married, so we'd been together about 5.5 years. So I still had that really strong sense of identity. I hadn't lost myself in this relationship, but I now had this burden of thinking that I was this insanely productive person who was always doing things. So fast forward a couple of years, and I was in another relationship, and I'm not going to go into all the details, but it was very rough. There was medical stuff and very, very difficult on both sides, and I ended up falling into a really, really, really deep depression, like the deepest depression I've ever experienced in my life. And I had this sense of, this identity that I was this productive person always doing things, but my depression wouldn't let me do anything. I'd go to my job and then I'd come home and just drink and watch Netflix, and that went on for a couple of years, I hate to say. And because I wasn't being productive, I was beating myself up. So it wasn't like I was just being depressed and losing myself in Netflix. I was depressed and not doing anything and losing myself in Netflix, but also beating myself up because I wasn't writing, I wasn't creating, I wasn't doing things. I was wasting my life away. And that made the depression even worse because I just felt like an utterly useless slug. And then March 26th, 2016, everything came to a head, and I 100% believed that the world would be better off without me, that everybody in my life would be better off without me. I completely believed that to the depths of my soul. So I wrote my farewell letter and I had it all planned out. But as I swiveled in my desk chair to stand up and go do the deed, Tiberius, my dog, was sitting right there, blocking me from getting up and just staring at me with those soulful puppy dog eyes. And I knew that I couldn't leave him. He needed me. And I knew that I needed to get help. So I checked myself into the psych ward at a local hospital, and I spent 3 days there. And then I spent another month in intensive outpatient therapy. And things got better for a while. For a few months, life felt really good. But I still hadn't developed really any healthy coping mechanisms. Nothing in my life had changed. I hadn't developed healthy skills, and I slipped back into depression. And I want to be clear, I was in therapy also. I had been in therapy for many years. I saw my therapist regularly, but it just wasn't enough to pull me out of that funk. And then I started working with a life coach, and it was a long journey. I've talked about it a little bit before, but as I started uncovering pieces of myself and looking at things that I had done and experienced in a different light, my first reaction was to think, oh wow, I've been a really shitty person. And then I got really, really depressed again for quite a few months. But I finally realized that, well, okay, maybe I did some shitty things, but I'm not that person. Just because I did those things doesn't mean that I am a horrible person. And I started using it to, how can I not do this again? What do I need to shift in myself to be a better person? And over a couple of years, things just really did start to get a lot better. I still had a lot of ups and downs. I was still applying the tools that I had learned sometimes, and other times I was still letting my apathy get the best of me. So it was still a roller coaster. But I was, through all this, I still had my sense of self. I still knew, at the core at least, who I was. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew who I was at the core. So I'm thankful that I still hadn't entirely lost that. And then in late summer, early fall of 2018, I really started diving deep into my spirituality again. And I started reading more about witchcraft and paganism. And this just opened up a whole new world of tools, new methods of self-reflection, the concept of shadow work, self-care and self-love rituals, and just so much that just took my personal development work to the next level. And I'm not going to say that I was magically cured of depression or anything like that. I mean, far from it. It's 3 years later-ish, however the math work, 18, 19, 2.5, 3 years later, whatever. And I'm still very much not struggling, but I'm still working to develop that self-love practice in my life. And there's a lot more deeper stuff going on there that maybe I'll talk about in the future. But it's been a path, it takes time. And that's kind of why I wanted to share all this, is to show that it's not a linear path from self-loathing to extreme self-love. It's very up and down and back and forth and all around. It takes a lot. It can take a lot of time and a lot of really, really hard work and patience. But I'm getting there, and I feel so much better. And these days, yes, I still, especially during the pandemic, which has been hard for everybody, obviously, it's been an even more, more of a roller coaster emotionally than I've had in a little while. But now I recognize that if I feel that darkness of depression starting to creep in, rather than fighting against it and trying to push myself to still keep being productive and doing things, if I just embrace it and allow myself to take a few days off, not off my day job, but off of doing things for myself with whatever it might be. And if I just let myself rest in the evenings, it passes a lot more quickly, and usually a lot more easily. And it doesn't get quite as dark as it used to. So I've learned a lot of coping skills and added more practices into my life like that really does make things easier. And when they are bad, it makes them easier to deal with and to get through. So I mentioned that I call myself a serial monogamist. I haven't been single for more than 7 months, basically my entire life. And I am dedicating 2021 to being single and taking care of myself and falling in love with myself. And I know this is going to be a little difficult because right now where I am, it feels kind of contrived, and resistance is telling me that I don't even know where to begin. But I do know where to begin. My plan is to date myself. And yes, that sounds ridiculously cheesy. And like I said, it feels a little bit contrived right now. But fake it till you make it, right? So I'm going to do the things that I would do for a romantic partner for myself. Write myself love letters, cook myself, fancy meals. And instead of taking it up and eating it at my desk in front of my computer, actually setting the table and lighting a candle and having a candlelight dinner with myself. And, I can't really take myself out on dates right now in the pandemic nonsense that's going on, but, just do things, maybe have date nights at home or something. So, and it feels very contrived talking about it right now, but I feel and I hope that in time it will feel a lot more natural. And I know, talking with other people, and I've worked with Kellyanne Maddox on this as well, who has just been so helpful. Yes, you've got to fake it till you make it sometimes, but I've got to start somewhere. I think Tiberius agrees if you hear him grumbling. And the last thing I think I want to talk about is one of the reasons that it can often be so hard for us to develop a self-love practice, the way we were raised. I've thought a long, long time, over the years trying to figure out, why don't I love myself enough to take care of myself? Why don't I eat healthy? Why don't I exercise? Why can't I love myself enough? And I've finally just very recently realized that when I was growing up, my parents sacrificed so much for me. And my mom especially, she just gave and gave and gave and thought of me and my dad as well, far before she ever did herself. I mean, I can remember my dad would have to practically drag her to the shoe store to buy a new pair of shoes because the ones she was wearing had a hole in them. And it's not that we couldn't afford for her to buy a new pair of shoes. She just genuinely didn't think of herself. She thought of us before herself. And I realized now that she wasn't really taking great care of herself in that way. And I'm really ecstatic right now though, because as once I moved out and as I just got, I guess, gotten used to not having me at home, or I don't know what the reason, but she has just blossomed and she takes such good care of herself. She eats healthy. She lost a ton of weight. She buys clothes. She has a closet full of clothes and shoes now that she loves, that fit her well, that she loves wearing and feels good in. And she really does take really good care of herself these days. And as I was preparing for this video and writing some notes for it, I realized just how powerful that is, that where I am right now, I'm taking that earlier page from my mom's book of putting everyone else before me. I will dump everything into a romantic relationship. I will be there at the drop of a hat for a close friend. I will give and give and give all day to other people. But I need to take that new page from my mom's book where, yes, she is still very much a giver and a very wonderful, kind person. Both my parents are. But now my mom takes care of herself. And I need to embody more of that. I just realized that tonight. And I think that's something I need to do some more work around and some journaling. But that's just a really, I don't know, it's just a very kind of enlightening thought in a way. I hope that makes sense. But anyway, that is pretty much what I think I wanted to say about my self-love journey. It was a rocky start. There's ups and downs. There's still going to be ups and downs. There will always be ups and downs, I'm sure, because that's just life. There's ups and downs in life. But I am well on the way, and it just takes trying different methods and maybe combining methods. Like for me, therapy kept me, for the most part, at least semi-stable in day-to-day life. But it took the methods of a life coach to really start pulling me out of where the darkness that I was in, and then combining that with my spirituality. And it takes a lot of experimenting and working and being patient with yourself. So, if you're new on a self-love journey, just be patient with yourself. It might take a lot of time, but don't give up. I promise you, when you start coming out the other side, it is so, so worth it. So if you want to leave a comment and share some of the struggles that you have faced in your self-love journey, or just any thoughts you want to share. And reminder that Wednesday I will be doing my live chat about self-love and self-care techniques at 7 p.m. Central Time here on YouTube. So I hope you can make it. I will, I think, have a little plan of some things that I want to talk about, but I just want to have kind of an open, free-form chat of how we all do self-love and self-care and share some tips and tricks. So until next time, be kind to yourself and those around you, and let your light shine for all the world to see. Bye.